From beginning to end, the entire history of the French Revolution and Napoleon's empire. A single man would rise from obscurity to command the fate of Europe, forging an empire that challenged the very foundations of monarchy. The sparks ignited in the heart of Paris, fueled by centuries of inequality and the cry for liberty, equality, and fraternity. The French Revolution unleashed forces that reshaped nations and echoed around the world, paving the way for an extraordinary Corsican soldier who would crown himself emperor. But how did a revolution born of idealism descend into terror, only to birth an imperial dynasty that conquered and then collapsed within a generation? We must start from the beginning. Long before the cry of liberté echoed through the streets, France groaned under the weight of its ancient regime. King Louis XVI, a well-meaning but indecisive monarch, inherited a kingdom teetering on bankruptcy. Years of costly wars, including support for the American Revolution and a tax system that exempted the nobility and clergy, had drained the treasury dry. The people, burdened by heavy taxes and famine, grew restless. In the spring of 1789, facing financial ruin, Louis XVI summoned the Estates General representatives of the clergy, First Estate, nobility, Second Estate, and commoners, Third Estate, for the first time in 175 years. The Third Estate, representing over 95% of the population but granted only equal voting power to the other two tiny privileged estates, demanded reform. When their calls for voting by headcount were rejected, they took a revolutionary step. On June 17, 1789, declaring themselves the true representatives of the nation, they formed the National Assembly. Fearful of the king's intentions, the newly formed assembly gathered on an indoor tennis court on June 20th. There, led by figures like the fiery orator Honoré Mirabeau and the idealistic Abbé Sieyès, they swore the tennis court oath. With hands raised, they vowed not to disband until they had given France a written constitution. This act of defiance marked the true beginning of the revolution. The king, initially hesitant, seemed to yield, but rumours swirled that royal troops were massing near Paris. The people, already suffering from bread shortages, grew panicked. On July 14, 1789, seeking arms to defend the assembly and themselves, a Parisian mob stormed the Bastille, a formidable prison symbolising royal tyranny. The fall of the Bastille sent shockwaves across Europe. Peasant uprisings, known as the Great Fear, spread through the countryside as rumours of aristocratic plots ran wild. Manors were burned, feudal records destroyed. Faced with this popular fury, the National Assembly acted decisively. In a single, astonishing session on the night of August 4, 1789, the nobility and clergy renounced their feudal privileges, tithes, hunting rights, seigneurial dues, dismantling the legal structure of the old regime. While the countryside burned with liberation, the Assembly worked feverishly in Versailles. On August 26, 1789, they unveiled the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Inspired by Enlightenment thinkers and the American Declaration, it proclaimed liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression as natural rights. It declared all men equal before the law and asserted that sovereignty resided in the nation, not the king. The Assembly then set about drafting a constitution, transforming France from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional one. Louis XVI, now effectively a prisoner of the Revolution, was forced to move from Versailles to the Tuileries Palace in Paris in October 1789, under the watchful eye of the people. The Assembly also seized vast church lands to back a new currency, the assignat, and reorganized France into 83 departments, breaking the power of historic provinces. The civil constitution of the clergy, 1790, required priests and bishops to swear loyalty to the state, not the Pope, causing deep religious schism. However, the revolution faced enemies within and without. Émigré nobles, like the king's own brothers, plotted counter-revolution from abroad. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, desperate to escape Paris and reverse the revolution, attempted to flee to the Austrian Netherlands in June 1791. They were recognized and captured at Varennes, dragged back to Paris as virtual prisoners. This flight to Varennes destroyed any remaining trust between the king and the people. Meanwhile, Austria and Prussia, fearing the revolutionary fervour would spread, issued the Declaration of Pillnitz, August 1791, threatening intervention. War seemed inevitable. Inside France, political clubs like the radical Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, and the more moderate Girondins vied for power. The newly elected Legislative Assembly, dominated by Girondins eager to spread revolutionary ideals and force the king's hand, declared war on Austria in April 1792. The war began disastrously. Prussian forces joined Austria, and their commander, the Duke of Brunswick, issued a manifesto threatening Paris with destruction if the royal family was harmed. This enraged the Parisians. On August 10, 1792, a massive insurrection erupted. Radical Parisians and National Guardsmen stormed the Tuileries Palace. The Swiss Guard defending the king was massacred. Louis XVI and his family fled to the Legislative Assembly for protection, only to be arrested and imprisoned. The monarchy was effectively overthrown. The Legislative Assembly dissolved itself, calling for elections by universal male suffrage for a new, more radical body, the National Convention. As the Prussians advanced towards Paris, fear and paranoia gripped the city. Rumours of royalist plots and traitors within the walls led to the September massacres. September 2nd, 6, 1792. Mobs stormed Parisian prisons, summarily executing over 1,000 prisoners, including priests and nobles. On September 20th, as the tide of war miraculously turned with a French victory at Valmy, the new National Convention met. Its first act on September 21st, 1792, was to abolish the monarchy. The next day, September 22nd, 1792, was declared the first day of Year One of the French Republic. The fate of the deposed king, now called Citizen Louis Capet, dominated the convention. After a trial where he was found guilty of treason, he was condemned to death. On a cold morning, January 21st, 1793, Louis XVI was executed by guillotine in the Place de la Révolution, now Place de la Concorde. His death sent shockwaves through the courts of Europe, uniting them against the regicide republic. Britain, the Dutch Republic, Spain, and other states joined Austria and Prussia in the First Coalition. France was now fighting for its survival against most of Europe. Internally, the revolution faced massive revolts, especially in the devoutly Catholic and royalist Vendée region. Faced with military disaster, economic chaos, including inflation fueled by the assignats, and internal rebellion, the convention created the Committee of Public Safety in April 1793. Initially dominated by Georges Danton, it soon fell under the control of Robespierre and his allies. To save the Republic from its enemies, the committee instituted the Reign of Terror, September 1793, July 1794. Revolutionary tribunals dispensed swift justice, sending perceived enemies of the revolution, Girondins, royalists, hoarders, even former radicals like Danton and the Hébertists, to the guillotine. Tens of thousands perished across France. The committee mobilized the nation for total war through the levée en masse, creating massive revolutionary armies that began to turn the tide against the coalition. While the guillotine fell relentlessly in Paris, a young artillery officer from Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte, was making his name. In 1793, he played a key role in recapturing the port of Toulon from the British. His brilliant tactical use of artillery earned him promotion to brigadier general. However, after Robespierre's fall and execution during the Thermidorian reaction, July 27, 28, 1794, Napoleon, associated with Robespierre's brother, was briefly imprisoned. His fortunes changed when the new government, the Directory, established by a new constitution in 1795, faced a royalist uprising in Paris, 13 Vendémiaire, Year 4, October 5, 1795. Tasked with defending the convention, Napoleon famously ordered his cannons to fire grapeshot into the mob, crushing the insurrection. He was hailed as the saviour of the Republic and appointed commander of the Army of the Interior. Seeking a popular general to lead an ambitious campaign against Austria in Italy, the Directory chose Napoleon. In 1796, at the head of a ragged, ill-supplied army, Napoleon launched a stunning campaign. Through brilliant manoeuvres and decisive victories at battles like Montenotte, Lodi, Castiglione and Arcole, he shattered Austrian power in northern Italy within a year. The Treaty of Campo Formio, 1797, ended the War of the First Coalition, ceding Belgium and the left bank of the Rhine to France and establishing French satellite republics in Italy. Napoleon returned to Paris a national hero. Fearing his ambition but unable to ignore his popularity, the Directory sent Napoleon to Egypt in 1798. His goal was to threaten British interests in India. He won the Battle of the Pyramids and captured Cairo, but his fleet was destroyed by Admiral Nelson at the Battle of the Nile, Abukir Bay, stranding his army. While Napoleon campaigned in Syria, news reached him of political instability and military defeats in Europe. The War of the Second Coalition had begun. Sensing opportunity, Napoleon abandoned his army and sailed back to France in late 1799. The Directory was widely unpopular and ineffective. Conspirators, including Napoleon's brother Lucien and the director Emmanuel Sieyès, plotted a coup. On 18 Brumaire, year the 8th, November 9, 1799, troops led by Napoleon surrounded the legislative bodies at Saint-Cloud. After a chaotic scene where Napoleon was nearly shouted down, his brother Lucien, presiding over the Council of 500, called in the grenadiers to clear the hall. The legislature was dissolved. Power was vested in 3 consuls, Napoleon Bonaparte, Sieyès, and Roger Ducos. Sieyès drafted a constitution, but Napoleon swiftly manipulated it, becoming first consul with near-dictatorial powers. The French Revolution, which had begun by overthrowing a king, had ended by installing an emperor in all but name. As first consul, Napoleon moved swiftly to consolidate power and bring stability. He made peace with the Catholic Church through the Concordat of 1801, recognizing Catholicism as the religion of the majority while ensuring state control over the Church. He reformed France's chaotic legal system, overseeing the creation of the Napoleonic Code, Code Civil des Français, promulgated in 1804. This comprehensive legal code, emphasizing clarity, equality before the law for men, property rights and secularism, became one of his most enduring legacies, influencing legal systems worldwide. He centralized administration, creating the prefect system to enforce government will in the departments. He founded the Bank of France and reformed taxation, stabilizing the economy. He also made peace abroad, defeating Austria again at Marengo, 1800, and Hohenlinden, 1800, leading to the Treaty of Luneville, 1801, and signing the Treaty of Amiens, 1802, with Britain bringing a brief respite to a decade of war. France was exhausted but stable.
Grateful for peace and order, the French people approved Napoleon becoming consul for life in 1802. Yet ambition burned bright. When a royalist plot was uncovered in 1804, Napoleon used it to justify a final step. A plebiscite overwhelmingly approved the establishment of the hereditary empire. On December 2, 1804, in a magnificent ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French, taking the crown from the hands of Pope Pius VII and placing it on his own head, a symbolic gesture of supreme power derived from the people and his own will. The Peace of Amiens proved fragile. Britain, alarmed by Napoleon's consolidation of power in Europe and refusal to open continental markets, declared war in May 1803, beginning the Napoleonic Wars proper. Napoleon massed his Army of England at Boulogne, planning an invasion. To protect his flank, he sold the vast Louisiana Territory to the United States in 1803. However, the Royal Navy's command of the sea, confirmed decisively by Nelson's victory at Trafalgar, October 21, 1805, destroyed the French and Spanish fleets and made invasion impossible. Napoleon swiftly turned his formidable Grande Armée eastward against the newly formed Third Coalition, Britain, Austria, Russia, Sweden. In a campaign of breathtaking speed and maneuver, Napoleon surrounded and captured an entire Austrian army at Ulm, October 1805. He then marched into Austria and occupied Vienna. On December 2, 1805, the first anniversary of his coronation, Napoleon achieved his greatest victory at Austerlitz against the combined Austro-Russian army. Using cunning tactics, he lured the enemy into attacking his seemingly weak right flank, then smashed their center with a devastating counterattack. The Battle of the Three Emperors shattered the Third Coalition. The Treaty of Pressburg, 1805, removed Austria from the war, dismantling the Holy Roman Empire. Napoleon now dominated Central Europe. He established the Confederation of the Rhine, a grouping of German states under French protection, effectively ending the millennium-old Holy Roman Empire. He placed family members on thrones, his brother Joseph in Naples, later Spain, Louis in Holland, Jerome in Westphalia. Britain remained defiant. To cripple its economy, Napoleon launched the Continental System in 1806, a vast blockade prohibiting all trade between continental Europe and Britain. Enforcement proved difficult and caused widespread economic hardship, breeding resentment. When Prussia rashly declared war in 1806, Napoleon crushed its vaunted army in a single day at the twin battles of Jena and Auerstadt, October 14, 1806. He marched triumphantly into Berlin. Turning east against Russia, he fought the bloody, inconclusive Battle of Eylau, February 1807, in a blizzard, before decisively defeating them at Friedland, June 1807. This led to the dramatic meeting on a raft in the middle of the Niemen River and the Treaties of Tilsit, July 1807. Tsar Alexander I of Russia became Napoleon's uneasy ally, agreeing to join the Continental System. Prussia was reduced to a rump state. Napoleon's empire reached its zenith, stretching from the Atlantic to the Russian frontier, with satellite kingdoms and allied states across Europe. However, enforcing the Continental System drew Napoleon into the disastrous Peninsular War, 1808 to 1814. After deposing the Spanish Bourbons and placing his brother Joseph on the throne, Napoleon faced a massive popular uprising, guerrilla warfare, Little War, supported by a British expeditionary force under the future Duke of Wellington. The Spanish ulcer drained French resources and manpower for years. Seeking to tighten the blockade and punish Russia for trading with Britain, Napoleon made the catastrophic decision to invade Russia in 1812. He assembled the largest army Europe had ever seen, the Grande Armée of over 600,000 men from across his empire. The Russians refused to give decisive battle, instead retreating deep into their vast territory, employing a scorched earth policy. Napoleon captured a deserted Moscow in September 1812 after the bloody but indecisive Battle of Borodino. Finding the city useless and unable to force peace, and with the harsh Russian winter setting in early, Napoleon ordered the retreat in October. The retreat became a nightmare. Harassed by Cossacks, decimated by cold, starvation, and disease, the Grande Armée disintegrated. Only a shattered remnant of about 40,000 men crossed back over the Niemen River in December. The disaster shattered Napoleon's aura of invincibility. Sensing weakness, Prussia, Austria, Sweden, and Russia formed the Sixth Coalition. Napoleon rushed back to France and raised new armies, displaying astonishing energy. He won significant victories at Lutzen and Bautzen, May 1813, and Dresden, August 1813, but he was increasingly outnumbered. The decisive turning point came at the Battle of the Nations near Leipzig, October 16, 1813. Facing overwhelming coalition forces, Napoleon's army was defeated after 4 days of brutal fighting, partly due to the defection of his Saxon allies during the battle. Forced to retreat into France, Napoleon fought a brilliant defensive campaign in 1814, but the odds were impossible. Coalition armies entered Paris on March 31, 1814. The French Senate, pressured by the invaders and Napoleon's former Marshal Talleyrand, declared the emperor deposed. On April 6, 1814, Napoleon abdicated unconditionally at Fontainebleau. The victorious coalition restored the Bourbon monarchy under Louis XVIII. Napoleon was exiled to the small Mediterranean island of Elba, granted sovereignty over it. The Bourbon restoration proved deeply unpopular. Louis XIII's attempts to revive aristocratic privileges alienated many. News of discontent and quarrels among the victorious powers at the Congress of Vienna reached Napoleon. Seizing his chance, he escaped Elba on February 26, 1815, landing in southern France on March 1. His march towards Paris became a triumphant procession as soldiers sent to arrest him defected en masse. Louis XVI fled, and Napoleon entered Paris on March 20, beginning the 100 Days. He promised liberal reforms and peace, but Europe was united against him. Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia immediately reformed the Seventh Coalition. Napoleon moved swiftly into Belgium, hoping to defeat the Allied armies under Wellington and Blücher before they could unite. He defeated the Prussians at Ligny on June 16, 1815, but failed to destroy them. Simultaneously, Marshal Ney fought Wellington to a bloody draw at Quatre Bras. 2 days later, on June 18, 1815, near the village of Waterloo, Napoleon faced Wellington's Anglo-Allied army, drawn up on a ridge. The battle raged all day. Napoleon's initial attacks were bloodily repulsed. The crucial moment came in the late afternoon. As Napoleon launched his elite imperial guard against Wellington's center, the Prussians, whom Napoleon believed Grouchy's corps was containing, arrived in force on his right flank. Wellington's line held, the guard recoiled, and the French army collapsed into rout. Waterloo was a decisive, crushing defeat. Napoleon abdicated for the second time on June 22, 1815. Hoping for asylum in Britain, he surrendered to Captain Maitland of HMS Bellerophon. Instead, the British government, determined to prevent any further escapes, exiled him to the remote, windswept island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. There, under constant guard, Napoleon dictated his memoirs, shaping his legend, until his death from stomach cancer on May 5, 1821. The French Revolution and Napoleon's empire reshaped the world. The revolution's ideals of liberty, equality, and nationalism spread across Europe and beyond, inspiring future revolutions and challenging the old monarchical order. Its excesses, particularly the terror, served as a stark warning. Napoleon, the child of the revolution, became its conqueror and gravedigger. He exported revolutionary reforms like the Napoleonic Code, the abolition of feudalism, and administrative rationalization across Europe, dismantling ancient structures. Yet he also extinguished the revolution's fragile republican spirit, replacing it with imperial autocracy and dynastic ambition. His relentless wars cost millions of lives and devastated Europe, but they also accelerated the rise of national consciousness, particularly in Germany and Italy. The Congress of Vienna, 1814 to 1815, sought to restore the old order, but the genie of revolution and nationalism could not be put back in the bottle. The legacy of these tumultuous decades, the clash of ideals and power, the birth of modern political concepts, the redrawn map of Europe, and the towering, contradictory figure of Napoleon himself continues to echo through history. The volcano that erupted in Paris in 1789 had finally fallen silent, but the landscape it left behind was forever altered. The age of kings had been challenged. The age of nations and ideologies had begun. As the sun set on the emperor's lonely Atlantic prison, the world he had conquered and convulsed embarked on a new, uncertain path. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and share for more history.